Now, Zoro and the Straw Hats are in Ryuma's homeland, Wano, to take down one of the Yonko, Kaido. Now that Zoro has obtained Chusui from Ryuma after their duel, the possibility might arise that a new legend of slaying an Eastern Dragon might be born. I would like to say this just started. This whole thing about Zoro defeating Kaido or slaying Kaido or being the one to take down Kaido at the end. No, it's been going around for a while. I'm not saying that these people that are saying this are actually wrong, but let's just work through it and see what actually makes sense here. Do we think Zoro is going to be the one to slay Kaido? Is Zoro going to be the legendary dragon slayer? There's a one-shot that Oda made called Monsters, right? And the focus of this entire story is Ryuma. I remember back in the day, Roger's Base made a video about it, and he had a whole theory around Zoro versus Kaido in Wano. This was probably 3 years ago. These conversations have somewhat resurfaced due to the Enma stuff, in which Zoro is granted, or he already agreed to trade Zoro for Shisui, Enma, the only sword that was capable of scarring Kaido, or wounding Kaido. Something I want to point out as well, because in the Viz translations, it makes it a lot more clear. It heavily implies that this katana, this sword, is the only katana to ever wound Kaido, not the only thing to ever wound Kaido. This doesn't mean Kaido has never been wounded before, it just means that this is the only sword that was ever able to wound Kaido. Now let's work through this Zoro thing, like Zoro versus Kaido. First off, is there motivation there for Zoro to defeat Kaido? I scoured Twitter for a bit because a lot of people were talking about this on Twitter. Personally, when you look at it for face value, it doesn't add up as far as Zoro defeating Kaido, because we know that logically, the person that should take down Kaido is Luffy. Or if you want to take it another step, maybe Kid. Just off the top, without getting into details. Let's just take a step back really quickly. If Zoro's the one to take out Kaido, and Luffy's the one to take out Big Mom, that means out of everybody there in Wano, the two Straw Hats were able to take out two Yonko. I think we're at a point now in which the Straw Hats, they have to start to ascend. But I think there are a lot of strong opponents in Wano that they each can take down, and it doesn't have to be two Yonko. Of course, Luffy has to have a part in the fight versus the Yonko because that's his aspiration. Zoro, not so much, but I think he can be involved. But as far as taking down a Yonko or delivering the final blow, I'm not so sure. The first thing I'd say is how obvious it would be if Zoro actually took down Kaido. Of course, there's the parallel there of Ryuma, because we know there was mention of Ryuma slaying a dragon that flew over the capital in Wano. And Oda, of course, is playing with that parallel by even mentioning that, you know, a possibility of the Eastern Dragon being slain again, which Kaido is. It's also starting to be heavily implied that Zoro may be related to the Shimotsuki in some way. We already know that Ryuma is a Shimotsuki, so Oda is definitely playing with that parallel. But does this parallel involve actually slaying Kaido? Now, it did say in the One Piece magazine, I believe, that the only dragon that's able to fulfill this legacy is actually Kaido, but I don't think the person to slay Kaido has to be Zoro. I don't even think Zoro has to be involved in that fight. Here's the thing. Zoro and Luffy, they have different aspirations. Like, they both want to be great, but one is destined to be greater than the other. From a strictly power scaling standpoint, it's hard to assess the difference between Rayleigh and Roger because we don't know much about Roger, but I would say it was obvious there was some gap between their strength. Like, I don't think Rayleigh was able to defeat Whitebeard or Roger at any point. And I think the same is going to be for Zoro. A lot of people anticipate that Zoro could be on Luffy's level at the end of One Piece, in which Zoro could possibly take out Luffy. I don't think Zoro's going to be there. I think he's going to be extremely strong, but to the point of taking out the possible Pirate King, a lot of people presume him to be that way because, of course, there's several parallels. And it's interesting because there's a lot of characters that people parallel Zoro with. The first is Ryuma that I mentioned before because of the dragon slaying thing, their interaction with Extra the Bark, and the implied connection to Shimotsuki. And there are other variables, but those are the main things. He's also being paralleled to Rayleigh. Being the right hand of the Pirate King, it's a slash over your eye, a really good swordsman. Those are the main variables. And we can't forget the obvious parallel of Mihawk and becoming the world's greatest swordsman. And then people draw that parallel because of Mihawk and Shanks, and they assume that Zoro and Luffy are going to be like Mihawk and Shanks, in which they're somewhat close in strength. It's somewhat confusing at times. With Zoro, it's sometimes hard to scale him. Like, currently Zoro's power level is unknown, and that's putting it lightly, because we haven't seen Zoro technically go all out post time skip. He's put on his bandana before, but I'm talking about seeing his strongest attack from pre-time skip, or his strongest attack from pre-time skip, which is Ashura. We haven't seen Ashura post time skip at all. So people expect that Zoro, once he uses Ashura with his reformed sword and his stronger abilities, Ashura should have the DC comparable to some of the strongest we've seen in the verse. And I'm not sure if I disagree. The only issue is, in different scenarios, if you replace Zoro with different characters, things do not play out the way they did with Zoro. For instance, Zoro versus Kamazo and Gyukimaru. If we replace that with Luffy, I don't think Luffy's getting knocked out. But one thing Zoro really has never been strong at is observation haki. That's something he's decent at, but that's not his specialty. While Luffy at this point is literally seeing the future. It's somewhat of an unfair comparison, but you understand my point. Now, with this being said, I'm not going to say it's impossible for Zoro to defeat Kaido, because I don't think it's impossible. Again, with Oda saying the legend of slaying an Eastern Dragon is possible, Zoro's latent abilities that we have not seen currently, and also the use of Enma here. Now, guys, let's talk about Enma really quickly. The sword that we know was the only one to scar Kaido, or to wound Kaido. What's the purpose of giving Zoro that sword if he's not going to do anything to Kaido? I think symbolically the sword represents something more than just a weapon used to finish Kaido in this war. One thing that Zoro said on Zou when we were about to go to Wano was that he would round up the samurai and that he would have them following his lead in no time. If Zoro actually has Enma, the only sword that's able to scar Kaido, Zoro is actually the perfect person to lead the charge against Kaido. Not saying that he finishes Kaido, but he's the perfect person to rally the people in Wano. Him possibly being from Wano, being a great swordsman, inheriting Enma, the symbolism in regards to that, and again the parallel to Ryuma as well, there's nobody else fitting to somewhat round up the samurai of Wano. But there's something missing: King's Haki. I think that's something that either Oda has to flesh out now in this arc, or at some point we have to see Zoro use King's Haki for him to be regarded, I guess, on the same level as Luffy. What I mean is, let's say King's Haki as a power is not something that goes beyond knocking fodder out. It's an ability that's respected amongst the strongest people in the verse. They hold that ability to a high regard because it represents something. It's more symbolism there. Every person of note that we've come across, they have that ability. When I say of note, I mean the top tiers, mostly in the latter parts of the arcs. Doflamingo to Katakuri to Kaido to Big Mom. These people must have the qualities of a king and also fit to be the leader of men. Before we met Oden Kozoki or learned about Oden Kozoki, the legend was already there, and of course he was being hyped up. And then when it was mentioned that he actually has King's Haki, it was not surprising because of all the things listed about Oden Kozoki. One could say based on Zoro's portrayal and everything he's already accomplished, that's the one thing that he doesn't have that would place him on a tier in which if he does defeat Kaido, if he does defeat Big Mom, which I don't think there's any credence to him defeating Big Mom at all, I think it would go a long way. Again, that's not the only reason why Zoro should defeat Kaido or should not defeat Kaido, but I think it's a part of it. Now on Twitter, there was also talk about established rules in One Piece in which Luffy takes out the strongest person, Zoro takes out the second strongest, Sanji the third, etc., etc. I think for the most part, that's been the formulaic method that Oda has used, right? Whereas Luffy takes out the strongest guy, and then you can go down the list. There are times that Zoro teeters on attempting to go after the king. When I say the king, the strongest person. Of course, Zoro got overwhelmed by Enel. He took out Hody Jones underwater, but that was not juiced up Hody. He tried to go after Doflamingo, but he was stopped by Fujitora. Zoro does not have an issue going after the king. And I think it all comes down to narrative. Narratively speaking, if this happens, how do we feel about it? Let's play hypothetical. Zoro takes out Kaido, Luffy takes out Big Mom. How do we feel about it? Does that fulfill everything the narrative has been trying to tell us about Wano so far, or about the Yonko in general? If the captain of the Straw Hats and the right hand are the people to take out the two Yonko in Wano, I think narratively, if that was to happen, it would be kind of whack. Like, I'm not gonna lie. If Zoro and Luffy are the people that take out the two Yonko, it would, again, suspension of disbelief is something that I believe in which you just, try to remove logic and immerse yourself within the series, right? Just try to remove all that. If that happens, it's hard not to have it affect your impact on the story or just your immersion into a series. Zoro is not even the second, third, fourth strongest to me on the Alliance currently. And then he's the person who gets the hit in on the Yonko? All right, I think there are other people that Zoro can actually take out, like Kiyoshiro, and depends on where his allegiance lies. We also have King, Queen. There's several formidable fighters on Kaido's crew, or a part of Kaido's alliance that Zoro can actually take on. And we cannot forget that Big Mom is actually a part of this now, and Smoothie is there, who's actually a swordsman, and Zoro has no problem fighting women. I don't think Perospero or Daifuku by the end of Wano is going to be able to give Zoro a fight, but Smoothie definitely still should. She's a second commander, and I think Zoro has a ways to go before he can take down a right-hand commander, because I think that's right around where Luffy is, and I think Luffy is stronger than Zoro. I just want to get that out of the way. So while I might disagree with Zoro taking down Kaido, I'm not going to say there's no evidence or credence to it at all. Narratively, it'll just be weak. If Zoro is actually taking out Kaido over someone like Kid, what was the whole purpose of Kid's character? I think people are even asking that question now, but as Wano goes on and how I see it, is going to be fully fleshed out. Zoro is going to have a significant role in Wano. Like, he's going to take down significant people, just not the strongest thing in the verse. Leave that to Luffy or even Kid. There are two Yonko there, and I think those are the two that should collect the spoils spoils of the war. Of course, Zoro's gonna have his own spoils in regards to Kirishiro. We have to wait and see what happens with Orochi because it's implied that Momonosuke could have a role to play there. I mentioned this before about the fairy tale thing in which people can jump forward because they've technically gone forward 20 years so they can move forward their potential 20 years as well. I don't know if someone has the power to do that in Wano currently. I mean, the only person would be Lady Toki, but we don't know what her devil fruit is or where her devil fruit is, but we gotta see with that. Kirishiro, Orochi, King, Smoothie. There's several strong people that Zoro can fight to actually not only earn a bounty raise, but of course a merit increase and just his overall standing around the world. But guys, let me know your thoughts. Do you think Zoro could actually slay Kaido? Do you think it's actually a chance? Well, I agree it's a chance, but how high of a chance is it that Zoro is the one to take down Kaido? How high a chance is it that Zoro is the legendary dragon slayer by the end of Wano, and the dragon being Kaido? Leave your thoughts. Be sure to like the video if you did, subscribe to the channel if you have not for more content like this. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.